On this episode of Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, the infamous case of the death of baby Azaria Chamberlain, who was taken by a dingo, and her mother's decades-long fight for justice. Coming up right after this. Hello, my true crime friends. Welcome to Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans. I am your host, Belinda Brady, and welcome, guys. Welcome to my little podcast, my little one gal podcast where I discuss true Australian murders as I drink coffee, hence the coffee beans in the title of my podcast. Now, today, summer here in Australia has finished. We're now in autumn, but she is clinging on for dear life. It is hot, but nothing will drag me away from my caffeine. I have my black coffee with syrup, and whatever you're drinking, I hope you're caffeinated, I hope you're hydrated, and I hope you're doing really, really good. Now, as usual, I do a quick around of the grounds for where you guys are listening to me from, and the top listeners are from Australia, New Zealand, and the US. And I've also got people joining me from Turkey, from Ireland, from Finland, and from Costa Rica. That is awesome, guys. I absolutely love that. Keep going, keep listening, and keep spreading the word. I love seeing where you guys are from. And of course, if you want to reach out and send me a message, please do. I don't bite. Now, you can also subscribe to me because, one, you want to, or B, you want my bonus ghost stories episodes, spooky ghost stories. Australia is so haunted. Please come discover it with me. And you can also buy me a text. You can you can buy me a coffee. You can send me a text. There are ways you can get in contact with me. You can find me over on TikTok. So yeah, I'm here. And I would love for you to support me in any way that you feel fit. Now, my sources for this episode are www.nma.gov.au, webarchive.org/web, www.mamamia.com.au, www.injustice.law, www.abc.net.au, and dailytelegraph.com.au. Now, this episode, which I've titled A Dingo's Got My Baby, The Death of Azaria Chamberlain, really doesn't need a great deal of introduction. Most of us know the tragic story of what happened to baby Azaria, but for those of us who don't, I will give us a brief introduction because that's what I'm here for. And then we're going to dive right on in. So family holidays are meant to be a fun, relaxing time. I mean, sure, there's always going to be issues such as delays or personality clashes, but for the most part, it goes on without a hitch. But sometimes holidays don't. And I'm not talking about, flight delays or cancellations. I'm talking about when we return from our holiday without a loved one as the result of something awful happening to them. And this is what happened to the Chamberlain family. And that family name is now infamous in Australia and the world for, I guess, all the wrong reasons. And one that's infamy started with the heartbreaking cry from a mother, my God, a dingo's got my baby. So however you're listening to me, driving, working, gymming, running, walking, hanging, chilling, get your coffee, get your drink of choice, settle in and let's get started. So Lindy Chamberlain was actually born as Alice, but she was known as Lindy. And she was born on the 4th of March 1948 in Wakatane, and I hope I've said that correctly, in New Zealand. Now, her family were members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and her father, Cliff, was a pastor. And when Lindy was a toddler, the family moved from New Zealand to Australia, where they based themselves in Victoria, while Lindy's dad transferred all over to pastor new churches. Now, Michael Chamberlain was also born in New Zealand in Christchurch, and he moved to Australia in 1965 after he converted to the Seventh-day Adventist faith. He met Lindy, and the pair married in November 1969. Now, the newlyweds lived in Tasmania for the first 5 years or so of their marriage, as Michael, just like Lindy's father, travelled all over the state to pastor new churches that were popping up in the area. Now, their first child, a son called Aidan, was born in 1973. And the family moved to Queensland, where their second son, Regan, was born in 1976. The family settled in Mount Isa in Queensland. And on the 11th of June 1980, the couple's first daughter, Azaria, was born. At this time, Michael was serving as minister of Mount Isa's Seventh-day Adventist Church, and Lindy was highly involved in the church as well. And she was also a skilled dressmaker. She used her dressmaking skills to make wedding dresses on order. Now, in August 1980, the Chamberlains made a trip to Ayers Rock in Northern Territory. Ayers Rock is a massive orange rock in the middle of the Northern Territory. It is stunning, and it's been renamed Uluru. But it is known as Ayers Rock, but we do call it Uluru now. And they went there to see this beautiful part of Australia with their two young sons and their baby Azaria, who was around 9-10 weeks old. On the morning of 17th of August 1980, they set up in the area's camping ground, and Michael and the boys spent a morning exploring the area while Lindy and baby Azaria explored a formation called Fertility Cave on their own. It was there she saw a dingo just staring at them, and she would later say that she felt as though that animal was casing the baby out, like stalking the baby. After sunset, the family gathered with other campers at the campsite, and they had a barbecue. Now, Lindy nursed baby Azaria as she and Michael chatted with the other campers, and one of the other campers, a woman by the name of Sally, went to put rubbish in a nearby bin, and when she turned around, she saw that a dingo had followed her. Now, this was the same dingo who then appeared at the barbecue bench, and Michael Chamberlain tossed it a bread crust, which made Lindy tell him you shouldn't encourage them. This same dingo then pounced on a mouse near the campers, and one of the Chamberlain boys was actually chasing this mouse when the dingo pounced on it. Now, it needs to be said that dingoes are wild animals. Yes, they are cute. They look like cute, fluffy dogs, but they are not dogs, and they are extremely dangerous. They hunt large prey, including our kangaroos. And if you've seen the size our kangaroos can get to, that is an impressive task, bringing down one of them. They are not afraid of humans. If anything, they are not bothered by us. They're not. And they have been responsible for many attacks on people across Australia. Many have been fatal. One happened only recently on a girl who was over here visiting from Canada. Now, not long after this, Lindy put a sleeping baby Azaria into the tent where her older brother Regan was sleeping, and rejoined the rest of the campers, having a chat, having a drink, just enjoying their time. Soon after, little Azaria's cry came from the tent. So Lindy got up and went to investigate, and then came her cry. My God, a dingo's got my baby. A man by the name of Frank Morris was the first person to rush over to the tent, and he shined a light on the floor of the tent where he noticed blood on a rug. He also saw paw prints, and he noticed they faded as they hit the road. Soon other campers were on the scene with a torch, or a flashlight, as other places call them, to help look, as it was absolutely pitch black. Meanwhile, little 6-year-old Aidan cried to another camper, "The dingo has our bubby in its tummy." Nearly 300 men and women were looking for Azaria as they formed a human chain, as they walked into the shrub looking for anything. And Michael Chamberlain didn't join in. The men didn't join in, apparently. And apparently he told another camper she's probably dead now. This search showed up nothing but dingo tracks. But away from the group, another camper by the name of Murray had better luck as he followed dingo tracks under a sand ridge. There he found an indentation in the sand where it looked like the dingo had laid something down on the sand, and whatever it had left there or put there had left an imprint on the sand. Now, this imprint looked like a knitted weave, and little baby Azaria was wearing a knitted jumper, a knitted cardigan when she went missing. And unfortunately, the dingo or baby Azaria were not found. They weren't found. Police were called, and within hours, doubt over the claims that the dingo took a baby came into effect. Now, 4 detectives assigned to the case all had varying opinions on what really happened, and some bought the story, others did not. And as the media sensation, the media hype grew around this story, so did suspicion around Lindy. Now, I could not think of a worse situation to be in. You've gone on holidays with your young family. A dingo has taken your baby out of the tent. You know your baby was probably eaten by this dingo. You can't find the baby. You can't find the dingo. You've now left this campsite to try and, I guess, get some help, or I'm not sure. And you're met with resistance and suspicion straight away. This poor woman, she would have only been 9-10 weeks postpartum. So she's had this to deal with on top of newly having a baby. Her baby getting taken by a wild dog. Like, it is just unimaginable to me how awful that would feel. And to have no one really believe your story but honestly, it makes my stomach drop thinking about that kind of a situation. And I digress. I always do. Anyway, a week after Azaria disappeared, a man called Wally Goodwin was near the rock taking pics of wildflowers when he came across a torn nappy. Now, in other parts of the world, you guys call them diapers, but here in Australia, we call them nappies, and a jumpsuit. Now, he called the police, and Constable Morris, who had originally been assigned to the case, came to collect the evidence. So we now have a baby's nappy and a jumpsuit. On the 28th of August, Detective Sergeant Graham Charwood took over the case and went over the original report, which had some information in there that raised a few eyebrows. Now, apparently Lindy took Azaria to a medical appointment dressed in black, which is unusual for a newborn baby, as black is seen as the colour of mourning. And this struck the doctor as odd, so he thought he would go and look up the meaning of the name Azaria. So he grabs a dictionary and found it meant sacrifice in the wilderness, when it actually means whom God aids. And for whatever reason, this was noted by the detective who had spoken to the doctor. I mean, we can reach, and then we can reach, and then we can reach, and that's a reach. Anyway, now in laboratories all over the country, tests were being conducted to see if the murder by dingo story stood its ground. Blood, hair, and vegetation samples were taken from Azaria's clothes, and dingoes were shot and dissected to see if there were any human remains in them. Now, dingoes will also toss food wrapped in nappies to see if the dingo would leave the same mark like what had been found on the nappy that was believed to be Azaria's. And while this was happening, newspapers here in Australia were fueling an already suspicious country that Lindy did indeed kill her daughter and that she was blaming it on the dingo. They even went as far as to suggest it was some kind of religious sacrifice and that this was somehow linked to the Jonestown mass suicide that happened 2 years earlier. It was just nuts. And like so many women after her, Lindy's demeanour was attacked. Now, apparently she wasn't grieving properly. Now, we as a whole, we as a community of people, of human beings, judge people when they grieve. And I think it's disgusting because no one can tell you how to grieve. There is no textbook way on how to grieve. You grieve how you grieve. And apparently how Lindy was grieving wasn't good enough for the Australian public. And sadly, we haven't changed. And same with every other country in the world, especially when it's a woman. On the 1st of October 1980, police interviewed Lindy and Michael for several hours. Now, the interview was pretty standard, but Lindy expressed her frustration with the leaks to the press, such as forensic tests that have shown doubt on her story. And on top of all this, the police searched her car. So not only did she have public opinion swinging against her, she had lost her child, her newborn baby girl. Police were leaking info to the press. Now, just not long before this interview, a TV journalist and camera crew paid Lindy a visit at home, where they showed her a photo of her baby girl's jumpsuit, which had been found intact earlier, but with blood around the neck. Okay, so again, your newborn little baby girl, you went on a camping trip, a dingo took her from the tent, you're never going to see her again, and her little jumpsuit's been found with blood, and here's a journalist shoving this photo in your face. Now, the journalist asked the same questions many had. How could the jumpsuit be intact if a dingo got the baby? There was no rip, there was no tear, there was no obvious point of exit where Azaria left this jumpsuit. But how Lindy replied was a pivotal moment, massive pivotal moment in public opinion really turning against her. She replied to the question with, if you've ever seen a dingo eat, there'd be no difficulty at all. Because if you watch them eat the carcass of a cow or something like that, they don't eat the skin. They use their feet like hands and pull the skin back as they go, and they'll just peel it like an orange. Now, that's a fact. That is an out-and-out fact. Lindy wasn't saying anything that wasn't true there. Now, the public saw Lindy give that very factual reply, and they saw her give it rather coldly. But what they didn't see was the multiple times the journos and his camera crew filmed that question and her response to get the reaction they craved and to feed the hysteria. Lindy was asked what happened to her baby, and upon that question, she burst into tears. They made her do another take. So she choked up again. They made her do another take. They ended up saying to Lindy, the grieving mother, only months postpartum, look, Lindy, if you're going to get your message out there, you really are going to have to control yourself. Now, try again, get your emotions under control, and try to answer our questions. And they kept going until they got the response they wanted, and they aired it. In total, they asked that poor woman that same question 7 times before they got the response, the reaction that they wanted. At this point, Lindy already knew. She was absolutely up against it, and this interview did nothing to help her. In February 1981, Alice Springs coroner Dennis Barrett found that a dingo did take the baby. did take baby Azaria and that no member of the Chamberlain family was responsible. He did, however, rule that there was interference with her clothing by a person or persons unknown, and more tests on Azaria's jumpsuit was ordered. Now, the coroner allowed his inquest to be televised, which was unusual back in the day, and he told Lindy and Michael, "You have not only suffered the loss of your beloved child in the most tragic circumstances, but you have all been subjected to months of innuendos, suspicion, and probably the most malicious gossip issued in this country." If only that was the end of it. But sadly, it wasn't. And this inquest was the first of many. Now, the police, still not convinced, conducted a search of the Chamberlains' home, leaving with items from clothing to a pair of scissors, and they also took the family's car, which was a yellow Tirana. Now, a number of experts who had been involved with this inquest were not happy with the outcome, and they felt their work had been called into question. Now, baby Azaria's clothing was sent for further testing, and with pressure from the Northern Territory Police, who never bought the dingo story, they also tested the family car, the yellow Tirana. Apparently, blood was found in this car. Now, a second inquest was held in December 1981, and this time the case was put forward that Lindy murdered baby Azaria in the Tirana with a sharp instrument, probably the scissors that the police had taken from the family home, and dumped her body. A biologist testified that he had found fetal blood under the passenger seat of the car. Now, the first inquest was about dingoes being involved. This one was about blood being in the car, this apparent blood that had been found in the car, and it won the coroner over, and he then went on to charge Lindy with murder and Michael with being an accessory after the fact. On the 13th of September 1982, a heavily pregnant Lindy took the stand as the case against her began. The prosecution claimed that Lindy killed baby Azaria by cutting her throat, and though there was no motive for her killing her 9-week-old baby girl, they did say that the dingo story was a fanciful lie calculated to conceal the truth. Now, other campers testified, campers who were there that night, and they testified they heard the baby cry from the tent. And another saying she heard a dingo growl, and another one said that she had to pull a dingo off her 12-year-old daughter. The blood was explained away as blood possibly by a hitchhiker that the Chamberlains had picked up along the way, a man called Keith Lenihan, who had been bleeding. And if there was blood in that car, it's come from him. A crying Lindy took the stand as she described the knitted jacket her daughter was wearing the night she disappeared, and was told the dingo story was mere fantasy. The rest of the case was expert, and I use that term loosely, after experts stating that a dingo simply couldn't eat a baby, or that the amount of blood found on Azaria's clothes wasn't enough for such a gruesome death. Michael was called to the stand and questioned about his choice of words that night when he apparently told a camper, a dingo has taken our baby and she is probably dead by now. And like Lindy, his emotions or lack thereof were not good enough for the court and were not good enough for public opinion. Shockingly, even with campers saying, yes, we were there, we heard the cry from the tent, we heard the baby's cry from the tent, not from the car. How could she cry from the tent if she'd been killed in the car? Lindy Chamberlain was found guilty of murder, and Michael Chamberlain was found guilty of being an accessory after the fact. Across Australia, people who had been frothing for Lindy and Michael to be charged. And we're talking, there were souvenir tea towels, dishcloths with photos of dingoes with Azaria's name stamped on it, People wearing T-shirts cheered. They cheered. They felt like justice had finally been served. Lindy Chamberlain was sentenced to life in prison and Michael Chamberlain was given a suspended sentence. Lindy was led away from the court, where 1 month into her jail sentence in Berrimah prison, Lindy gave birth to her second daughter, a little girl she named Kalia. She said of the time, "Let them try and make something out of that." Lindy's new baby girl was taken from her and she was sent back to jail. Lindy was able to spend 1 hour with baby Kalia before she was taken away from her. Now, Lindy was released on bail for a bit, but 10 months later she found herself back in jail and 2 appeals for her sentence was rejected. Meanwhile, some Australians did believe her and a petition calling for her freedom was gaining momentum. And one of the biggest claims was the so-called blood in the Chamberlain Tirana was nothing more than paint emulsion. And over 100,000 Aussies had signed this petition. But it would be the misfortune of an English hiker, one who died after he fell off Ayers Rock during an evening climb. It would be his misfortune that would grant Lindy her freedom. Like I said, in January 1986, an English hiker fell off Ayers Rock during an evening climb. 8 days later, when police found his body, they also discovered a dingo's lair, and so they searched it. They searched the area looking for bones of the dead hiker because he'd been there for a bit, and they found something else instead. A stained white baby's jacket. It was Azaria's jacket, the one that she was wearing on the night that she died. This only proved without any doubt Lindy's innocence, and the Chief Minister ordered Lindy's immediate release from jail. On the 7th of February 1986, wearing a pink dress and sunglasses, Lindy climbed into a limousine and left jail to get on with her life, to try to get on with her life and pick up the pieces and start again. In 1987, a royal commission was held and all charges against the Chamberlains were quashed, and the blood in the car, the smoking gun of the blood in the car, was actually found to be deadening compound from a manufacturing overspray. And in 1988, all convictions against Michael and Lindy Chamberlain were overturned. A month later, the Chamberlains held a victory feast where they invited defence lawyers and witnesses. They invited a couple whose daughter had also been taken from their car by a dingo, and journos and politicians who supported them the whole way. One lawyer, a man by the name of Ken Crispin, remarked that despite their ordeal, the Chamberlains seemed free of bitterness or self-pity. In 1988, the movie Evil Angels, which is also known as A Cry in the Dark in countries outside of Australia, that's what it was released as, starred Meryl Streep playing Lindy. Lindy thought no one could have done her role better, and Meryl, of course, nailed it. And it brought global attention to Lindy and Azaria's case and helped draw attention to the forensic inconsistencies in the case and helped change public opinion of Lindy. But even after her conviction was dropped, even after she was cleared, she still faced scrutiny. People still howled like dingoes when they saw her in the street, because I don't know if they thought they were being funny or if they thought they were being smart. And apparently she still gets it a little bit today. Now, in 1990, the now famous yellow Tirana that the family drove to Ayers Rock on that fateful family trip was returned to Michael, and he restored it and donated it to the National Museum of Australia. He added the personalised number plates forensic, which was spelt 4 as in the number 4, ENSIC, and he called it a symbol of total forensics failure. I think that's brilliant. Now, in 1991, Lindy and Michael divorced, and Lindy said that she had her reasons for the divorce, and no, it wasn't Azaria and what them two went through after Azaria had died. She said things weren't good before this happened, but they survived one hell of an ordeal. They got through that together at least, and kudos to them for that. And in 1992, Lindy remarried American publisher Rick Creighton. Also in 1992, Lindy was awarded $1.3 million for wrongful imprisonment, and a third inquest was held in 1995, which returned an open verdict on Azaria's death. In 2012, a fourth and final inquest was held into Azaria's death, and coroner Elizabeth Morris found that the cause of her death was the result of being attacked and taken by a dingo. And those words are written on Azaria's death certificate as cause of death, with the coroner telling the couple, "Please accept my sincere sympathies on the death of your special and loved daughter and sister Azaria. I am so sorry for your loss. Time does not remove the pain and sadness of the death of a child." Outside court, Michael said of the findings, "This battle to get to the legal truth about what caused Azaria's death has taken too long. However, I am here to tell you that you can get justice even when you think that all is lost." And Lindy said, "No longer will Australia be able to say that dingoes are not dangerous and only attack if provoked. We live in a beautiful country, but it is dangerous." Now, the Chamberlain children, of course, were affected by all this. I mean, how could you not be? How could you not be? And Aidan Chamberlain, who he spent years thinking it was his fault because he didn't zip up the tent. But it wouldn't have mattered anyway because the zip was broken and the dingo would have gotten into the tent anyway. When he got married, he arrived to the church in a replica car of the family's famous yellow Tirana, which Michael apparently was thrilled with. He loved it. Regan, who was in the tent when Azaria was taken by the dingo, remembers the dingo walking over him, and he remembers it had blood on it. He also remembers playing dead, thinking the dingo had come back into the tent for him when it was really his mum telling him to get up and that a dingo had taken his sister. Now, Regan was bullied at school by other kids who called him baby killer or dingo's got my baby or made dingo noises at him. And he often got into punch-ups, and both he and his brother Aidan struggled with their frustrations growing up. Kalia, who was born when Lindy was in jail and was only allowed to spend an hour with her mum before being taken away and put into foster care, was raised by a foster family, and for the most part she said it was a really positive experience. She stayed with them until she was 3, the time when her mum got out of jail. And for a long time there, she struggled with the thought that she was a replacement for Azaria. But she wasn't. And when Kalia married in 2007, she was walked down the aisle by her 4 dads. Her bio dad, Michael, her 2 foster fathers, a man called Wayne and one called Owen, and Lindy's second husband, Rick. Michael remarried a lady by the name of Ingrid, and together they had a daughter, Zara. Now, Michael and Lindy remained on relatively good terms with each other, though it was said that there was some resentment towards each other, and I don't know how you could go through something like that together and not harbour resentment towards your partner. I mean, yeah, my God, traumatic experience. And both him and Lindy seemed to move on and just get on with life and make the best of what they had. Sadly, Michael was diagnosed with leukemia, and he lost his battle to the disease in 2017 when he died in a hospital in New South Wales with his son Regan and his daughter Zara by his side. He was 72 years old. Today, Lindy is 72 and works as an author and a speaker, and she remains a prominent figure in Australian history and culture, and she is a force to be reckoned with. Her and Rick are still happily married, and she is currently writing a book for children and another one on grief and forgiveness. She also gives seminars, lectures, and keynote addresses, helping people deal with their grief and learning the skill of being able to forgive. And there we have it, folks. The tale of a family who went on a camping trip and one of them didn't come home. What happened to that baby girl is unthinkable. I would never have thought a dingo would take a baby. Never. If I'd been camping, it wouldn't have even crossed my mind. And what happened to this poor family after the devastating loss of their baby girl was just, horrific and brutal and unfair and uncalled for. And we need to do better when people are grieving. We need to do better, especially women. There's no textbook. We're not pulled aside in school and said, this is how you're meant to look when you're grieving. There is no textbook way to grieve. We grieve how we grieve. We've got to stop judging people. We really do. My heart goes out to Lindy and Michael and the Chamberlain family. It really, truly does. And I think I will wrap this sad part of Australian history up with the words from Lindy herself, who to this day, like I said, is still howled at by idiots in public who think they're being funny or they're being clever, which I think are perfect words, and no truer words have been spoken. They say I'm a victim, but I'm a survivor. And that she is. And that's it, guys. Another Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans done and dusted. Thank you so much for your company, guys. And I'm going to give myself a teeny tiny little plug here. I have 2 books out and about, out in the world. One is a child's book about little people, a little monster starting school. His name is Bolt. He's very nervous. He's very anxious about starting school, and I'm speaking from my own experiences here. So if you have a little monster in your life that is starting school and is really nervous about it, let them read Bolt. Let them read my book so they know they're not alone in the world with these feelings. This book is called Bolt's First Day. BOLTS First Day by me, Belinda Brady. You can find that on Amazon. And I also have a collection of dark, spooky, scary horror stories published by the amazing people at Nightmare Press. It is called Murky Shadows, MURKY, and you too can find that on Amazon. So if you're inclined to read, or if you have a little monster in your life starting school who has, a lot of nerves and anxiety around it, this book is perfect for them. And if you love little spooky ghost stories, dark stories, horror stories, Murky Shadows is for you. So please, if you're inclined, jump on there, check it out. I will be forever grateful if you did. And that's my plug over. Again, guys, thank you so much for your company. Until next time, stay safe, stay cool, and stay caffeinated. I will catch you all later.